Let me record. Okay, perfect. Okay, well, amazing. Hi, everyone. My name is Lila Aspen. I'm the industry insider intern in the service field. So I specialize in law, nonprofit, and social justice. So I work at the Career Center, and there's a cohort of us interns. There's three of us, and we host these kinds of informational workshops to help you navigate internships and finding careers. And so we're all seniors. We've all been through this process before. And so really here to be as much help as I can be. And hopefully this is a helpful session for you. So if you haven't been to any of our sessions before, today's session is a kind of a broad, more general session on internship hunting. So we're going to cover a good amount of things. So we're going to start just like I'll introduce myself. Normally I'd ask people to introduce themselves, but we're on Zoom, so I'm not going to make everyone do that. And then we're going to go through finding internships, application strategies, resources, and then the end of Q&A. But like I said before, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me at any time. I really am here to answer questions. Like that's such a big part of this is just making sure that you're getting the information you're curious about, and I'm not just rambling on about information that you already know or have already heard before, because that's not helpful to anyone. And then another thing, like if you have a question, someone else probably also has that question. So it's really beneficial to everyone to make sure that if you're curious about something, you're asking it. And then if there's anything that we're not covering today that you're curious about that's, internship, career related, I'm happy to talk about it too. We can talk about it at the end or anytime in between if it's relevant. But yeah, okay, so me. My name is Lila. As I said, I'm a senior here. I'm a public policy major on the environmental policy and sustainable development track. I have a minor in legal studies, and then I'm also a Hayes Barnard Fellow in sustainability through Marshall. And then some of my extracurriculars at USC, I'm part of Leans, the Student Sustainability Committee, Spark SC Activist Incubator, and then I also work here at the Career Center. I've worked here last year and this year as well, so I'm very experienced in this as an industry insider intern. So, and then my specific field is government, legal, and policy, which, given my background, makes a lot of sense. Okay, and then this is something I always like to start off with because why are you taking advice from me? Why are you listening to things I'm saying? This is some of my work experience. I have highlighted in blue the things that I think are typically most relevant or the things that people are typically most interested in. And if you're interested in any of these, feel free to ask me specific questions about them now, later, at the end. Email me anytime. So Chicago Fair Trade is an environmental justice focused nonprofit. So that's like my nonprofit experience. I was an intern for US Senator Tammy Duckworth the summer after my sophomore year. So that's congressional internship. So if you're at all applying for government internships right now, I'm happy to talk about that process. I know that a lot of people attending these sessions have been. So I'm really happy to provide extra information on that if anyone's curious. And then I work for the Institute on Inequalities in Global Health here at USC. I did a fellowship there last summer, and then I'm currently a youth ambassador through that program right now. And then I also work at the Los Angeles Regional Reentry Partnership, which is a reentry and recidivism-based nonprofit here in LA. So I work on a lot of legislative work there. And then I'm also, just for this semester, acting as a student consultant at Nova Cottage Core. Nova Cottage Core is a affordable housing startup under Lacey, which is the sustainability incubator here in LA. So that's a really exciting experience, and it's a lot different than a lot of my other experiences. So if you're someone who's, say, in the business field or something like that, or if you're in like the policy nonprofit field and you're looking to branch more to the business side of things, I have some experience doing that, and I'm happy to talk about it. Okay, that was a little bit about me. Sorry, I realize I'm rambling. Does anyone have any immediate questions or any work experiences that they want to hear about or are like interested in that I can talk about before we get into the like actual presentation slides? Totally okay if not, but I just want to.
Hi, yeah. Was wondering if you could expand a little bit on your experience interning with Senator Tammy Duckworth.
Mhm, for sure. Did you have any specific questions, or I can just talk about it in general too?
Kind of like the application process, how you heard about it, and your initial steps to fill out the application.
Yeah, for sure. So government internships are really awesome because they're a very standardized process. So applying to all of them is very, very similar. So for whatever senator or congressperson you're interested in applying for, you would look up their name. So if you're looking for like Alex Padilla or something like that, if you're interested in interning in California, you look up their name, summer internship application or spring internship application, winter internship application, and their applications are just on whatever website they have. So that's should be the same for most Congress people, senators, anything like that. So I'm from Chicago originally, and I wanted to work close to home. And then Senator Duckworth has a really strong interest in environmental policy, which is kind of my primary area of interest. So that really matched well for me. So I applied through her website. There was no like networking or anything like that. It was just a straight up resume, cover letter. And then there's a couple of questions usually. So there's usually a couple of written questions just to show your writing skills. But they're usually not too long. It's not like a super lengthy application or anything like that. Sent that in. I believe the deadline is the end of February, I want to say. It might vary a little bit depending on what office you're applying for, but I would keep that in mind if you're interested in government internships at all. They're usually in this time period is right when applications are due. So you still have time to do it, but just make sure that's on the forefront of your mind if that's something you're at all interested in. And then I heard back, I had an interview. It was super short, which was really weird. I'm used to having really, really long interviews. I think it was like 15 or 20 minutes. And it was my internship director. It was really great. We just talked a lot about, you know, why this senator, like be prepared to answer that kind of questions, like why do you want to work in government? And then a big part of all congressional and senator internships is going to be working directly with constituents. So this is my biggest piece of advice across the board for government internships. Um, but it would be to highlight any customer service experience you have of any sort. So it could be volunteering, could be working at a restaurant, could be working at like a clothing boutique, anything like that looks really good because it means that you're able to handle customers and you're able to converse with people. And that's really a big part of being a congressional intern or Senate intern is, answering phone calls when people walk into the office with casework and with issues, you're going to be one of the people dealing with them. And so that's like a big recommendation to highlight on anything. My interviewer actually said that that was one of the reasons I got hired is I had like 6 years of experience working in a restaurant, and she said that that like customer experience was like exactly what they were looking for this kind of thing. Also, highlight interest in like politics and government, but I just mean in terms of non-traditional things to highlight, definitely don't discount that kind of experience. Um, and then for the job itself, I loved it. I like honestly can't really say enough good things about it. It really allows you to get your feet wet into government and politics. And it depends on the office that you are applying for, what you would be working on. I would say about a third of what I was doing was answering constituent phone calls, emails, letters, and then figuring out like what their issue was and then directing them to the right resources. And so that would either be like providing a resource list for them, providing a next step for them, or it would be sending them up with our casework team, who would then be going through their case with a federal agency. And then I'd say another good third would be working with the outreach team. And so most Senate and congressional offices have an outreach team and a casework team. So the casework team works with constituents on their casework, and then the outreach team works on like basically there's tons of people that obviously would want to meet with a senator or congressperson. They're not going to meet with all of them. They have such busy schedules. So the outreach team represents the senator at events. And so you get to meet with a lot of like constituent groups or like local politicians or anything like that. And then you can take notes on those meetings and then you send them up to the senator, which is super awesome. And it's a good way to get experience in specific subsets of policy. So I was really interested in health policy and environmental policy. And so I did a lot of those kinds of meeting, which was awesome. And then the third was throughout the entire summer. We had an individual project that we were working on, and it was basically like a big policy memo on whatever we were interested in. And whenever we had free time, we're supposed to work on that. And at the very end of the semester, or at the very end of the summer, we got to present it to like all of the senior staff in the office. And the whole point was it to have like a proposal for the senator to actually do, and like our policy memo would inform that action. So that was really fun because it was like an independent project. Yes, I just rambled about that. I think I've definitely over answered your question. But do you have any other specific questions about that specific internship?
Wait, no, you didn't overrample at all. That was really great information. Thank you.
Okay, great. I just got a direct message. Did you work in DC? So no, I didn't. I worked at the Chicago like state office. So senators and congressional offices will all have an office in DC, and then whatever their home state is, they have a couple of offices spread across the state. For me, well, first of all, Hill versus state office, neither is a better or worse experience. It really just depends on what you're looking for. For me, I have no desire to actually work on the Hill or work in politics. And so for me, it didn't make sense to move to DC and work on the Hill when I could live at home and just commute into the office. And so that kind of policy experience was more what I was interested in getting because I'm hoping to work in the nonprofit, like policy sphere, like governmental relations, versus working on the Hill for like a congressional office or for the president or anything like that. So when picking between state and Hill, it just really depends on what you're more interested in. And then what I said is true for both offices. But if you're working on the Hill, you'll do more like tours of the Capitol and stuff like that versus constituent work. So it just really depends on what you're more interested in. Okay. Any other questions before we get into the content? Okay, awesome. Well, please continue to ask questions. Like, it's really boring for me to just talk for 45 minutes, so I'm happy to answer anything you guys might have. I've been in your shoes. I get that it's a super stressful process, so really happy to be as much help as I could be. Okay, so this is something I like to show at the very beginning of presentations. This was made by the Career Center, but it's a timeline for the internship application process, depending on the industry you're in. So if you're anything like me, I had a lot of friends, especially when I was, well, still now, but when I was freshman, sophomore, and they were business majors, and by now, like they would have had their offer for next summer in, and they've got it all figured out. And that would always really freak me out because that's just not how the government nonprofit industry works. It's a much later timeline. And so if you can see at the very bottom, probably the industries you're most interested in. Obviously, I don't know what all of your majors are, but that's what this is for government, law, and nonprofit. So it's catered to that. But most of the application periods don't start until January, February, and then interviews usually really late February, March, April, even into May sometimes. So if you're here, this is a great first step. You're not late, you're not behind at all. Like this is the right time to start applying to these kinds of internships. So you're good. I'm proud that you're here and don't freak out too much if, your business and your engineering friends already have their plans figured out because you're not supposed to yet. Okay, getting into the actual meat of today's content. So we're going to start with where you should be looking for internships. So there's a good amount of places. A lot of job boards are sort of industry specific, and so you'll see that on like Idealist, USA Jobs, stuff like that. The two main resources that you should be using as a USC student are Handshake and LinkedIn, and then also the Trojan Network and like your faculty connections and networking, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So we're just going to run through a quick demo of Handshake and LinkedIn. Um, just like show of hands, how many of you guys are on both of them? Either of them? Okay, I'm seeing thumbs up. This is good, guys. Um, wow, I've never seen that like burst of thumbs up before. That's awesome. Okay. So this is just, we're just going to run through really quickly kind of the key tips to know when you're searching for internships and ways that just can make it a lot easier. Also, just as like a blanket statement, I feel like a question a lot of people ask is how many internships would you be applying for? Obviously, there's no real golden number, but a big thing that the Career Center likes to talk about is that you should be applying to a lot of internships, which is scary and it's frustrating because it takes a long time to apply to internships, and you're putting your heart and soul into writing these cover letters and editing your resume and everything, and so it's frustrating that you do have to be applying to a lot of things. Um, but that is kind of the nature of the job field right now, and so when I say a lot, I'm not talking like thousands, but I am talking like well over 20 or 30 is what you should be shooting for, which is hard, but these strategies will make it easier to find the internships and then actually apply to them. So Handshake through USC, you all have access to Handshake. It should be kind of your home base for looking for jobs. On the left is just kind of what the left-hand bar on Handshake looks like, and this is how you kind of can use all of those features. So home, feed. The feed is where you can interact with students, peers, employers. So that's kind of like networking. Inbox is where you'll get offers, or not offers, you'll get messages directly from like recruiters or employers encouraging you to apply to their jobs. It's usually like kind of an automatic response, but it's like if your resume or major or minor or anything like that fit the criteria they're looking for, you'll get those automatic messages. And then jobs is obviously kind of the most important one. That's where all the jobs, internships, fellowships will be. And then we're going to talk more about that in the next slide. And then events. You guys all know how to use the events tab because that's how you found this event. But that's how you see, USC events, Career Center events, recruiter events, anything like that. People is just all the students and alumni on Handshake. Employers, the employers on Handshake. And then Career Center is here. So you can go through the Career Center's tab to find a bunch of resources, all the office hours. If you want to meet with anyone at the Career Center, you can do like mock interviewing, resume guides, cover letter guides, anything like that. There's tons of resources on the Career Center tab. So I'd really recommend you guys checking that out if you haven't yet. Okay, this is what the job screen on Handshake looks like. And I've just circled a couple of important things. So on the top right are all filters you can use when you're looking for jobs. So depending on where you want to be, if you want to be full-time, if you want to be part-time, if you want it to be an internship versus a full-time job, if you want it to be, remote, hybrid, virtual, anything like that, you can click all of that there. So you're finding jobs that actually match the preferences you want. You can also sort by location. So if you want to stay in Los Angeles or if you want to go home, anything like that, or if you want to move to a new city, you can all filter that out there. And then another thing that's really important is this is obviously the search tab, but then once you fill out all of these things, you can save that with this like checkbox here. And then you'll get, I think it's weekly emails from Handshake about the new jobs that have been posted that match your searches. So you'll be literally getting handpicked jobs that match what you know you want. Which is really, really helpful because it means you don't have to be checking Handshake every single week because they'll just send you those searches. So that's something I really recommend doing. It eliminates how long you have to scroll on Handshake, which is, nice. So I'd definitely recommend that. And then, so these are what those notifications look like. So this is from last summer, but I would get an alert that would be like 25 new jobs match this search that you had, or 5 new jobs match this search that you had. And so that's just a really helpful way to continuously be getting updates on jobs that are opening. And then the last thing on Handshake, these are just some things to keep an eye out for. So there are tabs on Handshake that say like great for sole price public policy students. So obviously it says that for me because I'm a price major, but if you're in Marshall, it'll say great for Marshall majors or Dornsife majors. And so those will be jobs that like USC's Handshake algorithm has handpicked for specific majors. And then under job descriptions, it'll say like what they're looking for. So it'll say if you match the things that they're looking for. So that can be major, minor, year, anything like that. And so that's a good way to see very quickly if you're a good fit for the job. And then one of the best things I think about Handshake is when you find a job that you are interested in, if you scroll down to the bottom, it'll give you a list of similar jobs. And so that helps you kind of narrow your cycle of what you're looking for and not make it as hard to like keep looking for jobs. So definitely recommend checking that out. And then, okay, actually, this is the last thing about Handshake. Sorry. This button that says be an early applicant. We'll talk about the importance of applying early to stuff in a little bit. But that's a good thing to keep an eye out for because you'll know that like the job posting isn't about to expire or anything like that. And it's something that you can really like be on the ball, on the dot, and get an early application in. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about Handshake specifically before we move on to LinkedIn? Sorry, I'm out of breath. Okay. Okay, so now onto LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I feel like, is like the very stereotypical job search platform. The whole like 500 connections thing, whatever. I think it's never too early to start having a LinkedIn. I'd really recommend, even if you don't have tons of experience or anything like that, to set up a LinkedIn today. It's a way to keep in contact with, employers, with people you meet, people you interview with, anything like that, like professors, classmates. And it's a good way to update them on what you're doing and what they're doing. And it's a really great way to see more opportunities just through peer-to-peer networking. So even if you don't have tons of experience, make a LinkedIn, grow it. It's really very, very useful. So obviously LinkedIn, you have your own bio about yourself, all your job experience, totally fill all of that out like you want it to look nice. And then on your resume, you always should include your LinkedIn bio so you can go more into depth about certain things that you just don't have room to cover on your resume. And so then for the job search on LinkedIn, it's pretty similar to Handshake, to be honest. You can filter by, experience level, anything like that. You can save jobs. You can go back to apply for them. It's just the little, like this tab at the side of a job is where you save them. And then you can set preferences for like location, industry, anything like that. So all of these filters are a good way to get down to the jobs that you're actually looking for because there's so many jobs open on these kinds of platforms. Okay. And then after LinkedIn, onto the Trojan Network. So if you're not on the Trojan Network, I totally recommend it. It's a platform really for networking within USC students and USC alumni. And so you have an account set up automatically because, you're a USC student. But you can use this almost as we can okay. You can use it like you would use LinkedIn to network with people, but everyone on here will be formerly or currently at USC. And you can also see like there are people that will indicate that they're interested in helping people with certain things. So the people who indicate like interested in helping you with resumes or interested in helping you with career journeys or like job searches or anything like that. And so that shows you people that genuinely want to talk to you. And so you're more likely to get a message back from a lot of these people than you would from just like a cold LinkedIn DM or anything like that. Because, you already have the USC connection in common. And so it's a really great place if you're, looking to talk to people in certain fields, or if you're interested in a couple of different fields, but you don't know what you want to work in. It's a good way to network and kind of find those connections and figure out what industry and what job platform is for you. Um, Children Network was not around when I was a freshman, but it's been really helpful, and I'm really glad that USC has invested in it. I do find it to be very helpful in terms of finding people that, work at the jobs you want to have. So I do recommend using it. I know that a lot of people don't. I think it's really an underutilized resource. So all that to say, use it if you want to. Okay. So this is kind of my last big tip on like organizing applications and stuff like that. But I highly, highly recommend creating some kind of spreadsheet to keep track of all the things you're applying for. Like I said earlier, you're going to be applying for a lot of internships, especially, when you're a freshman, sophomore, anything like that. And so having something to keep track of them, have the link. I'm really notorious for scrolling on LinkedIn or Handshake like while I'm in class. And so rather than just like opening up a million tabs, like just pop them in here and then you can always come back to them later when you actually have time to work on job applications. And then this is also really helpful because you can organize them by due date. And then you can also say when you applied. So if it's been a couple of weeks and you haven't heard back, you know that it's time to follow up. Or if you had an interview and you haven't heard back yet, you can keep track of how long ago that interview was. So you can know the best practice for if you should follow up yet or if it just hasn't been enough time. Um, I think it's super, super helpful, and it's a really easy thing to do to make the process a lot more streamlined. And then also just like extra notes, like was there a USC interviewer, is someone work there, anything like that. Okay, so before we go into application strategies, does anyone have any questions specifically about finding internships? I know that that's like scary and very hard. Um, but yeah, does anyone have any questions specifically about that? Okay, I got a message. Any tips for freshman looking? Yeah, that's a really great question. So I get a lot of questions about freshmen, what to put on resumes, like if they don't have as much experience. I think for freshmen, my biggest tip, honestly, would be to look. Obviously, like apply for any internship you want, like more power to you. But I think that looking for more kinds of non-traditional experience in the summer can be really beneficial. When I was a freshman, I feel like I was like, I'm gonna get that job at the ACLU, like it's gonna be crazy. And that's just like not necessarily realistic because seniors in college could be applying for the same position. And so I'd recommend looking for like classes you could be taking, volunteer experience you could be doing, or maybe like smaller nonprofits and smaller government positions. And so like um congressional offices and state offices and stuff like that. Obviously, it depends on the field you're in, but focusing on smaller nonprofits and stuff like that, where they maybe don't require you to have as much experience, I think really helps freshmen, because you're in a smaller pool of applicants rather than like a huge pool of applicants. I think it's really hard to stand out when you're a freshman applying for jobs that like post-grad people are also applying for. Not to discourage you from doing that, but just as like a fair warning, like I've been there, I've done it. And I found the most success when I was applying for smaller companies and then messaging them directly and networking them with them directly, like on LinkedIn after I've applied and stuff like that. And I think that that's really helpful for getting those like initial interviews and stuff like that. Does that answer your question? Okay, awesome. Any other questions before we move into application strategies? Okay, okay. So application strategies. Um, Applying for jobs is time consuming and you have to do a lot and it's also confusing. So these are just a couple of application strategies we have at the Career Center. So first of all, understand when the deadlines are. You don't want to miss a deadline because, you were working on a class project or you had a midterm and it just slipped your mind. You want to make sure that you're up to date on deadlines and you're being able to meet them. Sometimes a lot of jobs, especially in the nonprofit field, I've found will occasionally close early if they reach the capacity of applicants they're able to review. And so obviously that's no fault of your own. Like if you were like, well, I'm just gonna do it the day before, like I get that. I've been there. But some nonprofits just don't have the capacity to review thousands and thousands of application. And so you'll run into a problem where you'll look for the job and it's gone. It's disappeared because they just have too many applicants and they can't go through all of them. So whenever possible, it's best practice to apply as early as you can. Obviously, if you can't get to it the second you find the job, like that's totally okay. But don't leave it last minute every time because I've definitely lost some job opportunities that way because they just closed before I had the chance to apply. We're busy people, like stuff like that happens, but just a heads up, something to look out for. And then second, make sure that you're tailoring resumes and cover letters to the job description. So job descriptions will have a lot of active verbs and specific things they're looking for you to be able to do. And you want to be mirroring those verbs and those descriptions in your resume and in your cover letter so that they're matching what they're asking you to do and you're saying you're clearly capable of doing it. So I know a lot of people will like turn the same resume in for every job. You should not be doing that. Every job you apply to, you should edit your resume. What I have is I have like a 2-page long resume, and then I just take off certain experiences depending on whatever I'm applying for and get it down to 1 page. So it's just highlighting the most important experiences I've had that match that role. If you don't have more than 1 page of experience, no worries at all, but you still want to be, changing the verbs and just making sure you're matching what they're asking to do and highlighting the skills that you have that they want. And then the same thing goes for the cover letter. So if they say, I don't even know. If they say like, we want someone who can analyze legislation, boom, right? I can analyze legislation. You don't have to say it verbatim, word for word, but using those key words is something they're going to be looking for because like you don't want to have them jump to get to what you're saying and be like, oh, I think this is what they mean. Like you want to say what they're asking for. They don't need to think about it too much. You know what I mean? Like they want to be able to read what you're saying and they want to know what you're saying. So tailor anything you're writing. Third, writing a compelling cover letter. So storytelling, enthusiasm, making sure you're aligning with their mission. I I will be the first person to say it. I hate writing cover letters. I hate it so much. I'm like, why am I like writing about dreaming to work at your company? I think it's silly. And I also think it's I struggle to find like an authentic way to write cover letters, but they're very important. If a job says cover letter is optional, it's not optional. You need to be writing a cover letter. Any chance you have to provide information about yourself and why you want to work at an organization, you need to be taking, which is frustrating because cover letters are time consuming, but you need to be writing them. Second, on that point, do not use AI to write your cover letters. I understand, I get it. Believe me, I get the urge to do so. But if you just spit, the job description and your resume in there and say, write me a cover letter, you're getting a cover letter that sounds like 100 other applicants' cover letters. So there are ways to use AI where it's constructive and it's helpful. And, you can send your cover letter in and be like, maybe give me feedback on this or places I can improve or I've done it where it's like you write your cover letter and then you give them the job description. You say, is there anything I'm not meeting this job description right now? So there are a lot of ways that you can be using AI to really help and enhance your cover letter, but it should never, ever just be writing your cover letter for you because that can get you automatically disqualified from running for any job, even if it was just like I have a test tomorrow, I don't have time to write this. Like, I'm just gonna spit it into AI and change a few words. Like, that is a really great way to get a really bad rap with a company. And then if they disqualify you because you used AI in something, they're probably not going to hire you again. Like they keep records of that kind of thing. And so it's frustrating and it's annoying to write cover letters. Believe me, I do not enjoy it, but it's an important thing to learn how to do. And we're going to go over that in a couple of slides too. But yeah, biggest thing, do not use ChatGPT to write anything for you, especially in this field. They want to know that you can write well. Like this is a really writing intense field. So I think even more than other industries, being able to write is very important. Okay. And then last, organizing. So spreadsheets, trackers, and that kind of thing, which I showed you in the last slide. Okay, does anyone have any questions about application strategies, best practices? We're gonna go into like resumes, cover letters right after this. Okay. Okay, so resume format. This is the best practice resume format that you should be having. Um, I get that it's boring. I get that it looks kind of ugly. This is the format you need to be having. Um, Name and info at the top. A big thing I see is a lot of people putting like their phone numbers or their full address. You don't need to put your full no address. I would put like your zip code so they know where you're located, your email, your LinkedIn profile, and your email address. And that's what you should have at the top with your name. And then while you're still a student, you want to have your education at the very top of any resume you're submitting. That's who you are. You are a student. So you want to have, USC, and then whatever you're studying, any like relevant awards, coursework, anything like that, you can all have. And I would just change that depending on obviously whatever job you're applying for. And then, this one has like a study abroad semester, anything like that, you're free to put at the top too. And then your middle section, which should be your biggest section, is your work experience. A big rule of thumb I have is, especially for freshmen, I get this question a lot, but it's, can you still have stuff from high school on your resume? And personally, obviously, like to each your own, like do whatever is right for you. For me, the rule is once you hit your sophomore spring, you want everything on high school off your resume. It's really hard your freshman year, like to have enough experience to not have your high school stuff on there. I totally get that. People who are looking at your resumes know how old you are. Like it says you're a freshman on there. So it's totally fine to have that kind of stuff then. By the time you're applying for jobs for your sophomore spring or sophomore summer, you want to have all of that high school stuff off and you want it to just be focused on college stuff. So yeah, work experience in the middle, and then I think I have a slide on. Okay, if I don't, I'll go back. Work experience in the middle, you want to be using active verbs. You want to be quantifying as much as possible and really writing impactful bullet points to make use of the space you have. And then if you so choose, you can have a leadership and like community involvement, volunteering section at the bottom. So if you're on e-board of a club or anything like that, you're a lead volunteer, that's a great place to put all of that kind of stuff. And at the very bottom, skills and certifications. That's very much like to each their own kind of thing. Especially I think in more like coding heavy stuff where you're like learning coding languages and stuff like that. I think that's really important to have. Or if you're bilingual, if you're trilingual, like having that there is really important. But if you don't have anything that you're like, I don't know that anyone really needs to know this, you're feel free to exclude it as well. But it really just depends on whatever you know and whatever you want to highlight. Okay, so these are just like a bunch of resume tips when you're writing them. So first of all, check for spelling and grammar errors. It's really easy, but it's a good thing to catch because it's unprofessional to have any kind of like spelling or grammar errors on there. You want to remove any photos or graphics that are taking up a lot of room. The only reason that would not be true is if you're applying for an art or design specific thing, and then there's kind of a different structure of resume you would have. I'm assuming none of you are doing that because this is government legal and policy. But in case you ever are, that rule kind of goes out the window a little bit more. And then have your name at the top with your contact information. So the rule of thumb is that within 10 seconds, um, your whoever's reading your resume should know who you are, your education, and like the most important work experience you have. So school, major, minor awards. And then, yeah, this is what I was saying earlier, but you really want to break down each of your main experiences into those bullet points. And you want to be using quantifiable stats and numbers whenever possible. So number of people you were organizing, number of followers, whatever the growth was, anything like that to really give them an idea of your scope of impact is really important. And then also you want to use action words. So, led, created, discovered, anything like that to like give life to your resume and not just be like the same word over and over again. And then keep it organized and concise. Yeah, never write something just for the sake of writing something. Everything on there should add something, otherwise, don't have it on there. And then this is what I was talking about earlier. You can omit roles that don't relate to the goal or position you're applying for if you're running out of space. So you want your resume to speak to the job, not just to you as a person, but you as an applicant for the job. Okay, yeah. So this is what's known as the F motion. This is how recruiters read resumes. So they read it like this. They're not reading every single line you write, which is frustrating because you're putting in a lot of time to write these resumes. but it's important to know where they're actually looking. So top, like your name and education, and then they go down and a little bit over. So whenever you're highlighting important things, make sure you're doing that with this motion in mind, um, while keeping that same format. I realized that was a lot of information, but we're sort of running up on time, so I'm trying to make sure we're getting through everything. Does anyone have any questions about resumes specifically? Okay, I got a message. What about putting interests on a resume? That's a good question. I personally don't have interests on my resume. So interests would be like a section below the like leadership or like skills section where it'd be like I I had a someone once told me they put like horseback riding on theirs. More power to you. Like do what you want. Some people like to put interest on there as a way to, bond with recruiters and like have like a kind of humanizing aspect to their resume. I don't personally have one on mine just because I feel like I have better use for the space, honestly, in terms of like adding a different experience or a volunteering opportunity. But if you think you have like a fun interest that might align with the job or might align with someone who works at the job, more power to you. Feel free to put that on there. There's not really a right or wrong answer. It's just kind of personal preference. Any other questions about resumes? Okay. Okay. So, hopefully you guys are familiar with this by now, but VMock is an AI platform that helps you edit your resumes and your cover letters. We all have accounts through USC, and you can use that link on the screen to find it. I like to think of VMock as Grammarly for resumes, which love Grammarly. I think I'd spell everything wrong if I didn't have Grammarly, to be completely honest. But VMock is super helpful. It gives you formats, it gives you templates to like make your resume, and if you don't have one yet, and then if you do already have a resume, you can import it in there, and it can grade your resume, give it a score, and then it will also give, as you can see in the middle, suggestions for how to improve bullet points and what to add, and if there's any spelling errors, anything like that. So it's a really, really useful platform for reviewing your resume, especially as you're altering it for jobs. And so you can, put in what job you're looking for, and it can help give you specific like impact words for that industry. So I really, really recommend it as a tool to use while you're building your resume. And then it also can help write not help write. It can help edit your cover letters. So there's a cover letter section as well. You can like set the purpose of your cover letter. You would give it like the job description, and then you would select a template, and then you would write it in there, or you could import it in obviously as well. And then that will help you write a more impactful, gravitating cover letter, which is what we're going to go over next. Let's see, I just got a message. Okay. For previous roles, such as various judicial internships that were completed in high school, can I still put them on my resume if they're strong in core parts of the career you want to pursue? Yes, that's a great question. So, if any experience you had in high school was really impactful on you and it's something that you would really want to talk about in a job interview, I think you should keep it on there. Um, it obviously depends on what you were doing in high school. But if you knew in high school what you wanted to do and you have an awesome judicial internship there, I think definitely keep that on your resume. As long as it's something that if you were asked about it in an interview, you have like impactful things to say about it and you have a reason that you kept it on there. So I would say just like rule of thumb is like don't keep it on just to fill space. But if you have things to say about it and if it was impactful and if it aligns with the internship you're applying for, you're more than welcome to keep stuff on there. I would just say rule of thumb, obviously, like resumes are ordered in terms of like recency, so it would be on the bottom, but that's totally fine. But yeah, I think that's a great question. Really good point. You definitely should keep that on there still. Okay. Sorry, guys, I'm out of breath. Okay, so now we're just gonna do a little bit on cover letters. So, steps to writing a cover letter, you want to address it very professionally, and then you want your contact info, the date, company name and position in the top left corner, and then followed by a professional greeting to whoever the hiring manager is. Ideally, you want to figure out who the hiring manager for the job you're applying for is, but if not, that is what it is. So then, introduce yourself, express your interest in the position and the company, and that should be your first paragraph. Also, I have a mock cover letter in 2 slides if this is a lot of information. But your first sentence should be something like, my name is Lila Aspin, and I'm writing to express my interest in this position with this company. I'm excited because of XYZ, and then you can go on from there. And then the third and fourth, or sorry, the second and third paragraphs should be describing your specific knowledge and skills that are relevant to the job description and why you're excited to work at that job because of it. So, like, my experience in this class has made me prepared to take on this role because of X, Y, and Z. And then you want to end your cover letter with a specific thank you, alerting them that you know what the position does exactly. So you want to show that you've read the job description and that you're grateful for their time reading this cover letter. So here's a mock cover letter. I did not actually write this. I did find it on the internet, so it does not represent me fully, but this is like a really good, just kind of very sample template that you can change for every cover letter you're writing. So I do think that while you should be writing new cover letters for every role, you can keep a very, very similar format. And so it does become very formulaic writing cover letters because you're writing the same things each time. So it's like your name, I'm interested in this position because of X, Y, and Z. Yeah, Nicole?
Let's say you're applying to multiple roles, like for one company, like they
Mhm.
have multiple internships. Can you submit the same cover letter, like for each application, or would you recommend that we write a different one each
So
time?
that's a great question. If it's different roles, I would write a different cover letter for each position. Obviously, you can keep some of the meat the same about like why that company, but if the role is doing a different like job function, you want to change what you're saying because obviously your experience would speak to different functions of the job. They can definitely be similar and like you can use a lot of it. But if the job description is different and if like the role title is different, I would write a new cover letter, which I know sucks, but yeah, I think that's probably best practice. Okay. Anyway, I encourage you to take a screenshot of this, and then you can also use the templates that are in VMock to really help you write a good cover letter. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to be cautious of time. Okay, so that was resumes and cover letters. Does anyone have any more questions about resumes, cover letters, anything like that before we move on to networking, which is kind of our last big chunk? Okay, awesome. So networking is super, 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 super important. I am such an introverted person. I was so scared to start networking. It is not, I still don't feel super confident doing it. It's scary. I overthink it. It is so incredibly important to me, networking, as soon as you step foot onto USC's campus. So there's a lot of purposes to networking. I think a lot of people view networking just as a way to get jobs, but networking is super helpful to learn what you want, learn what you don't want, and learn about specific industries and fields. And there's really a lot of people you can network with. So obviously, learning, building connections, job hunting, gathering information, all super important things. And you can also network with anyone. So your peers in classes, your professors, people on LinkedIn, Handshake, people who have jobs you want, people who work at companies you want to work at. These are all people that you can and should be reaching out to and networking with. So totally get that it's a scary process. I'm the first person to admit that I'm not amazing at it, but there's a couple of ways you can do it. So first, on-campus events. So on Handshake on the events tab that we talked about earlier, there's tons of networking events. There's tons of events hosted by recruiters and employers. I encourage you to go to them and make use of that. In classes, talking to, people in your classes, and then also talking to professors. Your professors are some of the most connected people you'll ever meet. And they are so, so happy to connect you to other people that can tell you information you want to know. So I really encourage building relationships with your professors, going to office hours, and that kind of thing. Also, in professional settings, obviously, probably the easiest place to network. And then LinkedIn, Handshake, Trojan Network, those kinds of platforms. And then also cold emailing. So either cold emailing through LinkedIn or cold emailing like traditionally, like through the email that they have either on their LinkedIn or on like the job website or whatever their bio website has. If they have a LinkedIn, I'd recommend messaging on LinkedIn rather than emailing them. But if they don't have one, cold emailing is totally fine. People are very used to it. Um, yeah, and I would encourage it. When looking for people to network with, I really, really, really cannot recommend enough USC alumni. The Trojan network is so strong. People love to talk about USC, and it gives you an immediate connection to talk about. And so I think I find that people who went to USC alumni are more likely to respond, especially to a cold email, a cold DM, anything like that. So definitely something I'd really recommend doing. So how to reach out to people. So this is an example of an email I wrote sophomore year of college. So it's probably not the best. But this is just an example of the type of cold email you send. So this was a professor. It was a guest lecturer I had in one of my classes, and I had an assignment from my classes to interview professionals in fields I was interested in. And so this was like my follow-up email to them to ask if we could do kind of like a coffee chat situation. And it was really great. So this is kind of a sample of those kinds of emails you can send. And then these are examples of LinkedIn messages. LinkedIn is a little bit is hard because there's only so many characters you can send at a time. And so your initial cold ones, like your cold messages, have to be pretty short. And so I think these are good examples of just like, hi, my name is Lila. I'm super interested in whatever position. I saw that you're currently working in it. I'd love to connect and learn about your experience. Like this is short and sweet to the point. You don't need to like send them your resume, anything like that. You just kind of want to get a short, quick message out. And if they don't respond, they don't respond. It's no big deal. You can always follow up. And if they don't, there's hundreds of people in the world that would love to talk to you. And so you just have to kind of find them. But networking is a really, really, really great way to make more informed choices about internships you're applying for and also to learn information about jobs you're applying for. And it's something I would really recommend if you have the time and the ability to do so. And so then a lot of people ask, what are we supposed to talk about these calls? It depends on what you're trying to get out of it. If you're trying to learn more information about a job, I think that's kind of self-explanatory. If you're trying to learn more interested about a specific career field, ask questions about that. But three kind of general rules of thumb. If you're asking them for the informational interview or for the coffee chat, they should be doing most of the talking. So you should be asking a lot of questions. People love to talk about themselves, just like a general thing, especially when you're asking them about things you're really impressed by about them. Like people love to talk about themselves. It's just kind of a common thing. And then also you want to make sure you're introducing yourself. Whoever, you're networking with, you've probably looked up their LinkedIn and their work and everywhere they worked, where they went to school. Like they might not have done that about you. So at the very beginning, you want to introduce yourself, give a short little spiel. My name is major, minor, year, most recent work experience, and then like what you're interested in getting or not getting, sorry, what you're interested in doing in life. And that should be a quick spiel. Like you're not rambling on for 10 minutes. It should be like a 1 to 2 minute situation. And then finally, in these kinds of calls, you want to make some kind of ask. That ask should never be for a job. Like you never want to be like, okay, so now I can have this job, right? That's not the purpose of that. That would then be an interview. You know what I mean? Even then, don't ask for the job like that. But that's like not the right vibe. You want to be asking for something that's small and tangible and that they can do easily. So it can be to be connected to someone they know, maybe someone they mentioned. It could be to send over a report or a project that you guys talked about, or even for just some kind of advice at the very end. But it should be very easy for them to do and it shouldn't cost them anything. But it is just a nice, like, final ask to do. Okay. And then post call or post interview or anything like that, you want to make sure that you are following up with a thank you. So it can be on LinkedIn, on email, however you guys were connecting, but it should be short and it should be specific and it should be within 24 hours of your informational interview. And then also you want to make sure you're connecting with them on LinkedIn if you haven't already. But in this follow-up message, one of the reasons that it's so great to have some kind of ask is then you can reference that in the thank you note. So dear Mr. Smith, thank you so much for taking the time to meet yesterday. I really loved hearing your advice about XYZ. Or thank you so much. I thank you so much for like the contact to this judge. I really appreciate it. Um, Anything like that. So it gives you something really specific to talk about that makes you stand out from like anyone else and all the other generic applicants. Okay. Whew. A little talking. Okay, that was networking. Does anyone have any questions about networking or anything else in general? And while people are thinking of questions, those are the resources I was talking about: Career Center resources and then BMOC. And then I have my email on the screen right here. Feel free to email me if you have any questions, anything like that. And then I'm also hosting all of the industry insider interns are hosting coffee chats. So super informal, like kind of ask us anything style sessions where you can just come and ask me literally any question you have. Um, but they're on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. and you'd find them on Handshake. They're just called Industry Insider Coffee Chats, and then mine would say um, legal, nonprofit, and government. Yeah. Okay. So that's on there, free to use it. I'm super happy to meet with people one-on-one, answer emails, anything like that. But sorry, guys, I've been talking a lot. Does anyone have any questions now about anything? Also, I'll be having another one of these sessions on interviewing in a couple of weeks. So that should be, it'll be in time with like when you would be interviewing for stuff. So keep an eye out for that if you're at all interested in learning more about best practices for interviewing. How long are the coffee chats? The coffee chats are usually about 45 minutes, but you can hop in at any time during them. You don't have to stay for the full hour, so you can just come for like 5 minutes, and ask your question and then leave. Or you can listen to other people's questions as well, because I usually find that that's very helpful. But also, if you just have a question, you can also just email me. It just, it depends on whatever form of contact you prefer. How did you get over some of the fear of networking? That's a really great question. I think it's one of those things where it's like repetition builds confidence. Definitely for networking for me, I found it the least stressful to do it on LinkedIn. So cold messaging people on LinkedIn, but it's one of those things where it's like they can see a lot of information about you, they know who you are. And then it's also one of those things where it's like it's so flattering to be messaged on LinkedIn. I've now reached a stage where people sometimes message me to ask about my internship experience, and I'm always so happy to take time out of my day to talk about it. Because it really is truly super flattering if someone like wants to hear how you've done what you've done. And so I think thinking about it through that viewpoint really helps. And then also if someone doesn't respond, it's not because they're like, ew, why did she just message me? It's because, we're all really busy people. And so I think learning to not take no responses personally really, really helped. Because it helped me be kind of less self-critical when I wasn't getting responses back, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it's like practice, practice, practice. And like I still get stressed about doing it. But it's just like you gotta believe in yourself, I guess. Also, there's the on-campus networking events are really helpful to learn how to network. Okay, well, thanks for coming. That was like the end of the presentation. I'm just gonna stick around until 7 if you have any questions you want to ask one-on-one or anything like that. And then yeah, feel free to use my email, feel free to connect on LinkedIn. I'm really truly happy to be as much help as I can be. I understand how stressful this process is. But really feel free to reach out about anything. My door is always open. And then yeah, come to any of the follow-up sessions, anything like that. Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.